I will call to order the Personnel Policy Curriculum Committee meeting, which was duly noticed on October 3rd, 2025, through posting and notification of press in accordance with Wisconsin 19.84. Notice is hereby given that school board members who are not members of this committee may attend this meeting so as to constitute a quorum of the Board of Education. Any such board member attendance will be for information gathering only and will not result in direct decision making by the Board of Education at the committee meeting. I'm going to move right on over to our safety message for the month of October, and I'm sure we'll see some of this next week at our regular board meeting. But October is Fire Prevention Month, making it an ideal time to review fire safety protocols for the workplace and for home. Here are a few tips. Update emergency plans. Ensure that all employees know the fire escape routes and the location of the emergency meeting place. Obviously, make sure your family members know that as well. Check fire equipment. Inspect smoke alarms, fire extinguishers, and first aid kits to ensure they're fully functional and accessible. I just want to point out that we have one of those actually several of the fire blankets. I don't know if you've seen those. I've heard people say that they're very, very effective and easier to get out in emergency because there's not as many things you have to figure out. And I didn't necessarily think to have one on every floor of my home, and that is something that I have reevaluated and want to update. So just keep that in mind as a separate note. Control fire hazards. Remind everyone to be cautious with space heaters and candles and keep decorations away from heat sources. Prohibit open flames in the workplace. Electrical safety. Check for frayed wires and avoid overloading electrical outlets with seasonal decorations. Mental note for myself. Okay, so I need a motion to adopt the October 6th, 2025 agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. That motion passes. Commissioner Hayworth is coming soon, so we should expect her. Moving on to 1.4, presentation of staff evaluations by Dr. Allison DeGraff and Kim Paraboom and Carrie Mickelson. Thank you. Welcome.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As you said, Carrie, Allison, and I are going to be going over the supervision and evaluation process that we use in the district. We have 3 different employee groups in which we have supervision and evaluation processes for. Those are certified staff, non-certified staff, and administrators. But the common thing between all 3 is that the goal is to always be providing feedback and coaching so they can become better professionals within the school district of Janesville. When we look at our certified staff, the individuals who qualify underneath that category are all of our teachers, our counselors, social workers, psychologists, our therapists, academic learning coaches, our innovation specialists, and our reading specialists. For certified staff, we actually have state law requirements that we have to fulfill when we look at supervision and evaluation. So all districts are tied to these state law requirements. Number 1, there are 2 approved evaluation models in the state that districts are allowed to choose from. So you have to pick one of those. Certified staff also have to have a full evaluation or a summative year evaluation at least every 3 years after their first year of hire is completed. And all certified staff are required to complete an annual student learning outcome goal. In addition to these state law requirements, the district office is required each fall to meet with evaluators to go over what are the requirements, what are timelines, what are due dates. And then those evaluators meet with those that they supervise to make sure they understand the process and what is expected of them and that they know where a staff member is within a supervision and evaluation cycle. And all evaluators have to be recertified with the state every 5 years. And we also calibrate in-district per state requirements once a semester. And that's basically looking at inter-rater reliability to make sure that when we're supervising and evaluating staff, we are all looking at it through the same lens, and we use materials provided to us from CISA 6, and those are state approved as well. So what does this look like in the school district of Janesville? So in the school district of Janesville, we use the effectiveness project model with CISA 6, and that's based off of the work of Dr. James Strong. The other model districts can choose is the DPI model, and that's based off of the work with Charlotte Danielson. If you're a new hire to the school district of Janesville, you're required to do a student learning outcome goal, and you have a total of 6 observations. Those are a mix of announced and unannounced observations, and 3 of those observations require the employee and the evaluator to meet face-to-face and get feedback and talk about next steps in their instructional practices. Once they're done with their first year of hire, they move into their new hire year 2. They have to complete that student learning outcome again. They have a total of 4 observations with a mix of announced and unannounced, and they go down to 2 required face-to-face coaching and feedback meetings. After their new hire 2 year, they move into continuing year 1. After that's done, a continuing year 2 cycle. Those are kind of considered their off years. They're still getting feedback from their administrator. They get at least 1 announced or unannounced observation. They still have to do a student learning outcome. And then the evaluator has to provide them with written coaching and feedback. Yes, Lisa?
I'm gonna interrupt and ask a question before it goes out of my brain, because I think you're gonna transition into student learning outcomes. Does in my mind, when you say the evaluator, blah, blah, but then on this slide deck, it says 3 required face-to-face coaching and meetings with administrator. Does administrator equal evaluator?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then once they are done with continuing years cycle 2, they would hop back up into that 3rd bullet B, and they become a continuing year 3 cycle and follow the same expectations as the new hire year 2. So this is an example of a form a certified staff member would fill out regarding their student learning outcomes. It's a requirement that they pick an outcome that directly ties and aligns to the content area or areas that they are teaching. So in this example, the individual is tying it to reading. They have to have baseline data and a rationale as to why they're picking that. Almost all of our staff pick a goal that aligns with their building school improvement plan and or the district goals of reading, math, or attendance. For this individual, you see that she wants her kindergartners to get up to grade level by the end of the year, and if they're already at grade level, she wants them to grow at least 2 more levels. So it's a very rigorous goal. They identify strategies and supports. We have them focus on not a kitchen sink of strategies and supports, but those few strategies and supports that'll get them the most growth for their students. And they have to identify how they're going to progress monitor whether or not their students are making progress so that they can determine if they need to make adjustments in those instructional practices. Tied with the student learning outcome is also a professional practice goal that they have to identify. So as the lead learner, they look at an area of growth within their professional practice and they identify what they're going to work on during that year that will help to improve student outcomes. And they also identify a focus area for the year. So there are 6 standards for certified staff. They need to identify a standard in which they want to improve, and then underneath each standard are different indicators that make the standard more specific and more achievable. It is a possibility that a staff member identifies an area of improvement for themselves or a focus area for the year, but that the evaluator or the administrator gives them an additional area to focus on based upon their observations and feedback, or that administrator and evaluator could drive what those focus areas are going to be. And these focus areas are generally what they're going to look for when they go in and do the classroom observation. So when observations are scheduled, part of the CESA 6 model is a rapid cycle feedback process. So using those focus areas that the certified staff member and the administrator or evaluator have identified, they meet ahead of time and talk about what's going to be observed, or maybe an area in which the certified staff member is struggling and they want some feedback on from an evaluator. The evaluator then goes in and does that observation. Each observation is a minimum of 15 minutes. And then once that observation is done, if it's an announced where they met ahead of time and decided what was going to be looked at, they come together and they have a conversation as to what went well, what were areas for growth, and then they develop strategies or steps for the next time that evaluator goes into the classroom to observe. And that's why it's called a rapid cycle, because it keeps that continuous plan, do, check, act cycle of meeting and giving feedback goes on throughout all those observations. And even if it's an unannounced observation, the evaluator is still giving written feedback, and that certified staff member is expected to respond in writing as to action steps they're going to take based upon what was seen. So on a summative year, new hires, new hire twos, and continuing year three, those are considered summative years, or their big evaluation year. It's based upon a preponderance of evidence, and they receive a rating on each standard and how they fall within the state criteria and state rubric. So when I say a preponderance of evidence for a new hire year two, evidence from the previous year may be used. So we're looking at the whole teacher. We're not just looking at one lesson or one meeting that they were observed in. And for a continuing year three staff member, we look at evidence from the previous 2 years and take that into consideration when they receive those ratings. When this first started many years ago, staff would get an overall rating, and that is no longer the case. They just get a rating within each standard, and the expectation is that you are effective, with effective being a really big bucket of being highly effective to being low effective. Some additional information is that the evaluator reserves the right to add on additional observations at any time. So while those minimums are out there, if they feel they want to do additional observation, or they see someone doing something great, they can add an observation at any time and give that feedback. Also, if an evaluator has concerns and they've been working with a staff member, they have a lot of evidence of things that they've observed and or tried to put into place for that certified staff member, they can work with the appropriate director or human resources to put the staff member on a improvement plan, and that can happen during any cycle year and at any point in time in a cycle. And for some of our staff, they just need another summative year with more guaranteed and viable evaluations and observations and feedback built in. The evaluator can ask for them to stay in a summative year cycle to make sure that they get that coaching and support that they need if it's not quite to the level of improvement plan. So what we work with our evaluators on a lot is what evaluations are about, and they're not about being punitive. They're about giving teachers meaningful feedback and coaching and support so that they can be the best they can in front of students so we can have great student outcomes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison, and she's going to talk about administrator evaluations. Lisa.
Before we go on to the next section, if a certified staff member is on an improvement plan, do they get the requisite staff wage increase that we just approved at the last board meeting?
That would be a question I direct to either Superintendent Holzman or Carrie.
No.
Okay, thank you. And then another question is, with the teacher performance standards and the ratings distinguished, effective, developing, / needs improvement, or unacceptable, you had made some comment about there's different levels inside each one of those categories. So when you mentioned effective, you said highly effective to low effective. Is there a rating inside each one of those categories that?
There is not, but when we train evaluators or when the state trains us, they always train us to look at effective and assume effectiveness and then either go up or down. And if you're weighing on like, oh, I can't decide if they're effective or developing, weighing on swinging someone up, which would make them probably that low effective versus developing in that standard.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. So as we think about the evaluations of our administrators, it really mirrors and reflects what you saw for the certified staff, but based on different standards. So who is included when we talk about administration? So that would be our principals, coordinators, for example, our math curriculum or ELA coordinators, athletic directors. So those are part of who would be in the administrator evaluation process. And as I mentioned, it really mirrors what Kim just walked you through, but it applies to administrators as well. So the first, as a new hire principal or administrator, in the first 2 years, you will have 6 observations, but it's based on the 6 administrator standards, so those are different, and requires in those 6 observations face-to-face coaching and feedback with their supervisor and evaluator. And for the principals, that would be Chris and I meeting with them during those 6 meetings. Then in their second year as a new administrator, it would go down to the 4 observations as well, following that similar process. And then they move into a continuing 1 and a continuing 2 cycle, and will cycle back up to the summative year in year 3 as well. So what are the administrator standards? These are the 6 standards that we follow for administrators, where we provide feedback and we ask administrators to collect evidence in relationship to how they are performing, or evidence of how they're performing within those standards. And as Kim mentioned too, as part of the SLO process that they do as well, they look at each of the administrator standards and they do a self-reflection and evaluation of where they fall within those 6 administrator standards. And then when they're on the summative evaluation cycle, we also provide a rating for them at the end of that evaluation cycle on where they fall in each of the standards as well. So a little bit, I wanted to talk specifically about the new principal 1 and 2 cycle. So some things we do in addition to the evaluation cycle to support and onboard our new principals to provide that coaching and feedback. So for both Chris and I, when there's a new principal hired at the elementary or secondary level, we provide them a mentor in those first 2 years at that level. So somebody in our district who is experienced at that level, who they meet with on a regular basis as well as ourselves. We also enroll them in the New Principal Academy, which is our state administrator association, brings all new principals together for that year. And they have 3 to 4 sessions where they train them on building level leadership action steps, and also provide coaching and feedback from state administrators as well. We meet with them monthly as well as part of the evaluation process, but just to provide support to them as a new administrator. Now, do we talk to them more than that? Yes, of course, but we schedule specifically time to meet with them. And then, for example, we have a new principal at Lincoln this year, so I went out and we do walkthroughs together in classrooms, so then we come back and talk about, what do you see in those classroom observations to make sure that we're providing coaching and feedback on how they're evaluating teachers in the classroom as well. So we found that to be very effective in helping them in their evaluation process with teachers. So again, they also have an SLO, but their SLO is obviously focused on more of looking at data and developing a goal at the school level. So how am I going to increase, for example, proficiency in reading, maybe based on the forward exam for all students, and what specific leadership action steps am I going to take to show that growth? And then there's a flag. They also are required to do the SLO and PPG, so thinking about what's a professional practice that they want to focus on for the year to further develop themselves as a professional. So as Kim mentioned, it's really also a rapid cycle feedback process. Again, the goal that they're focusing on is aligned to their school improvement plan, because that's aligned to the district goals as well. So their SLO and their rapid cycle feedback will be based on a school improvement plan goal. And when we meet with them, so again, we're not going and observing them teaching. So our observations might look like We may go to one of their leadership team meetings to provide coaching and feedback. We also may just meet with them one-on-one, walk through their school improvement plan, ask them to show us evidence of some of their instructional leadership actions, and what evidence do you have to show us that you're making progress towards this goal? And what other ways can we support them? And so that looks a little bit different than going in and observing someone teaching as well. But our goal is really to give timely, targeted, and actionable feedback to the principals as well, to help them support them and be the best leader that they can be within the buildings as well. And again, at the end of their cycle, they're also reflecting on their goals and their action steps. And then we are talking with them about those reflections and giving our own reflections on their progress over the year as well. So I'm going to pass it to Carrie now to talk a little bit about non-certified staff evaluations.
So our non-certified group is our administrative assistants, our paraprofessionals, our nurses fall under this, our food service, our therapy assistants, we've got our bus paras in there. So almost everybody else that is not on the certified or the administrator group, they get their performance evaluation. The only thing that I would say is the same between all three of those is the summative. They get one their first year, and then the third year after that, so they'll get one. And at any point in time, if they've got any performance issues, we can speed that up if they do not want to go for the full year. It's based off of 6 standards, so professionalism, interpersonal skills, problem solving and decision making, organization, communication, and then job knowledge. There's also an area to develop goals with them and identify those with that. Our rating scale is a little bit different. It exceeds standards, meets standards, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. Under each one of those job knowledge and communication sections, there's different statements that are in there. If it doesn't apply to them, they can put NA, and we monitor as those come through for each one of our staff as well. So our non-certified group has the same monitoring system as the certified group. It's just a little bit of a different evaluation. Any questions?
Just full of them tonight. What system do you use within the school district to make sure that all of this is organized and that the tracking method is there so you know which certified staff, which administrators, which non-certified staff are all on all of those different cycles? And how is that employed then to their evaluators or administrators / supervisors at the beginning of the year so they can plan out their year for all of those evaluations?
Yes, great question. So our certified and our administrator group is all in our frontline system. So we go into the system and assign where everybody's at. If a principal says, I want them to have another evaluation this year, we go in and make that change at the beginning of the year, and then that kind of sets the stage for that group. For the non-certified group, we use Excel, is probably the easiest way, and it's tied in, so we take all the names that are there in the second year, we put that through, let all them know at the beginning of the year that those evaluations will be coming through, and then we give them a time frame for completion.
Just 2 questions. So who does the non-certified staff?
So their immediate supervisor does the non-certified staff. So for mine, obviously for HR, I would do those for all the folks that fall within HR. The custodial staff would be Dave Farwell. The maintenance staff would be Dave Leader. So each one of their managers or immediate supervisors, that's really close to their work. So it's not a few levels off. It's right there with their direct reports.
Okay. And then how do you know that all of the evaluations are getting done? Is there any documentation to Lisa's question? You know who to do when, but then how do you know that they got done?
So then when they come in, so from frontline, it's a little bit easier because we can pull reports to see who's completed and who's not completed. For the non-certified staff, that is following up when we get them,
we check them in before they go into their file. I review it, or we go through that process. Nicole usually gets them, and then she'll go, hey, you should probably look at this one a little bit, or this one looks like there's some, needs improvement on here. Maybe we need to talk about putting them on another cycle evaluation or an improvement plan of that sort. So they're all reviewed and then checked in. Once those check-ins come through, then we make sure that those are completed, and there's a lot of follow-up. So still have a review due, just don't forget to turn it in. Here's your time frame from when to bring it in. So I would say the non-exempt is more, or the non-certified staff is a little bit more labor-intensive, but I would say it's a process they have, and it's a well-oiled machine process, so they don't usually miss them.
I have two questions. The first one is for the administrators, when they're evaluated, is there any input from their staff?
We do not necessarily go ask their staff for feedback. Again, we will be implementing staff surveys, but we don't really use those necessarily towards their evaluation, but it does give us information and feedback regarding kind of the culture and climate within the building. Also, many times, if there is a challenge or an issue within the building, we do have teachers that provide feedback to us. And so we are able to take that feedback and determine if it's something that we need to address or not, so.
And then my other question is, and this is probably, anyway, why do we use the CISA 6 versus the DPI one? Why is one better than the other, or why does CISA 6 fit better for Janesville School District? Do you want to?
So when we were determining which model to use, the CISA 6 is just a lot more user-friendly. And the amount of support and coaching we get from the CISA 6 staff on different PDs to do with our principals or newsletters to roll out is above and beyond what DPI provides.
How long, just for continuity purposes, have we been using the one for CISA 6? I think I should know that, but I don't. Have we been using it for many years, so that
Yeah,
consistency
we were using
from year
it
to year?
when, I think Allison and I were using it when we were still elementary principals, so I'd say at least 10 years.
And then a follow-up question is, why don't you ask or survey the staff when you do principal evaluations about school climate? Because even though you share that some teachers will provide you with feedback, there are others that might not feel comfortable in that situation coming forth. So I think of the ones that may have really valid concerns about the school climate, but they will never share that with you because they don't want to feel like they want to share. A survey would be an anonymous tool to be able to gather some feedback on some critical things that might be happening in a school that might otherwise you might miss or the other teachers might miss. So I'm just wondering why that tool isn't used. Is it just because it's labor intensive to maybe have a standard, 5-question, 1 through 5, just on culture? And I mean, I don't know if that could be developed and then used throughout all the elementary and middle level, 1 per. Just asking, because I think that's valuable. That if people don't want to come forward, it would be a tool for you to glean information to be a part of that evaluation.
I mean, I think the reason we haven't used it is it's not necessarily a part of the evaluation model that we use with CISA 6, so that's not something that they include as a tool within the strong model. So in following that model, we use their evaluation process for each standard, and under each standard are specific indicators and how they're performing related to that standard. Again, we are doing a staff survey. I mean, that's something we could talk more about as a team, but currently it hasn't been a part of the system that we use for evaluation. I don't know that it's something that other districts use either, but that could be something that we, ask as well. So, and the surveys, as I mentioned, that we will be doing. They're not necessarily a part of the evaluation process, but it does give us some more insight into what is happening in our buildings and how we can better support them or if there are concerns.
I only ask because I think of like a highly effective leader within a building, and when you walk into that, I'll just use elementary. If you walk into one elementary school, you have a really good sense that there's a really effective leader in there because you can just feel it when you walk in. You can walk into another elementary school and you don't get that same feeling. It usually has something to do with the leadership within each one of those respective buildings, and then you think about that effective leader or non-effective leader, that brings the rising tide up. So it does affect all of those other categories within the model you're using. Is just you're not quantifying it. So that's why I asked, because I think it all relates. It's just you don't have a specific section in that tool to identify that, which might affect other categories. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that's why I asked.
I mean, I do think too, in their standard around human, one of their standards is around their human resources management as well too. And some of that you can also see within, rates of turnovers within buildings too. That can give you some insight, and there's also exit surveys that happen around that. So that has, also gives us information too as well to help know if there are concerns that are identified there as well.
I just was thinking about the administrators, and we do have a new administrator at the elementary level, and what support we provide. Obviously, they're trained on how to do these evaluations, but when you're an experienced administrator, you have like your schedule, and and it's just part of your whole routine. But these new administrators are learning, so when they're brought in, what can you just like real briefly share what support or feedback or assistance they're given to start working in these evaluations? Because it's a lot. I mean, as I'm looking at this, I think, man, there are a lot of evaluations that have to be done, and then obviously a lot of reports that need to be submitted as well. So just some of that, so that as we have these administrators having these high expectations, how are we supporting them so that they get these things accomplished?
Yeah, no, great question. So a couple different tools that we provide, and again, as Carrie mentioned, for administrators and certified staff, they're all housed in our frontline management system, so that's how we access all of their evaluations. So a couple of different things. Before they start as an administrator, they have to go through a CISA 6 training. So as Kim talked about the calibration, they will do that with us twice a year too. So they will have that experience twice this year, but even before they started the school year, they had to go through a training by CISA 6 that they completed, and we verify that they complete before they can actually do evaluations. Also, we provide for them specific timelines for when all of the due dates are for teachers, whether it's for their SLOs. We provide pacing for them. Here's where you should be in January, about how many evaluations you should have done. And if you don't, how can we support you? Also, that's part of when I talk about those monthly meetings with principals. They will feel very overwhelmed by that because there are so many other things going on during the school day. So I've sat down and calendared some of that out with them. Okay, so what might that look like? And let's set a short-term goal. How many do we want to have by December? And if we don't meet that, then we adjust. But and new principals will ask that too, I just don't know how I'm gonna get this done. And we talk about that's normal feeling. So let's talk about what that schedule might look like. That's also why they're paired with another elementary principal, because they can say, well, aren't you pulled out for, a behavior issue or a parent, or so how do you get that done? And they'll share their strategies and tools that they use as well as veteran principals, so.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, because it's one thing to see like, oh, this is what the evaluation is or what they're looking for, but it's a whole other concept of how do you even get to the point where you can do a evaluation and then maybe reschedule an evaluation. So thank you for that feedback. These were all really great questions, and this is wonderful to see all of these different pieces of the puzzle. And you know, I think very often we are focused on one specific idea in education, but there's so many moving parts, and this is an example of a lot of hidden work that people go unnoticed from all of you, and then the evaluators and the people. It's just a lot to make sure that our students are learning effectively. And so I, want to show my appreciation for all of the efforts that everyone is putting in so that we can just be held accountable, because I think that's really important. So thank you for the presentation. Moving on, everyone, to presentation updates on student achievements by Dr. Allison DeGraff and Chris Menwalt. Thank you.
That's all right. So we had the opportunity to share with the board an update on our 24-25 goals. And following the board meeting, we had the state release of our forward and ACT data. So now we have the opportunity to see not only how we did in comparison to the state, but how did we do with our comparable districts. So tonight during the presentation, I want to do a quick review or overview of what we saw at the board meeting. So how did we do on those specific goals in reading, math, and attendance. Talk about some of the growth we saw. What do we think some of those action steps district action steps that really helped improve that growth and achievement? So what are those things that we think we were doing that we need to keep doing? And then we want to show you some comparable data to other districts across the state that are like us. And then and based on that, we're going to see where some of those gaps are. So what are the things that we need to focus on this year for that continuous improvement? So again, we talked about our student academic excellence pillar as part of our district strategic plan. So we know that reading, math, and attendance are our goals. We know that really in grades 3 through 12, our focus is on increasing proficiency by 2%, whether that's on forward or ACT. So as we shared with you at the board meeting, just a quick overview again, we met that goal in reading in grades 3 through 8 with a 2.6% increase, where the state had a slight drop. In the pre-ACT reading data, we had one cohort that exceeded the growth and one cohort that we saw a decrease in. When we looked at our math data, if you remember, we had about a 1.1% increase, so we did not meet that 2% goal, but we saw, again, a decrease at the state level in that area. And for ACT, pre-ACT in math, again, we saw the opposite. In one cohort, for example, 9th and 10th, we exceeded that 2% goal, where the other cohort, we had a slight drop. And then in attendance, we did not meet the state average goal, but over the last 3 years, we've continued to make progress in our efforts towards attendance. And so we believe those strategies are continuing to make an impact, that we want to continue those as a district to hopefully accelerate us to reach that state average. If you also remember, we highlighted a couple of areas where we really saw some strong accelerated growth. That 8.1% increase in third grade ELA, where the state stayed the same. And then in 8th grade math, where we had an over 4% increase as well in 8th grade, and a kind of a slight increase at the state level. We also know that our ACT composite data, we saw a 0.8% increase, where the state stayed the same with their ACT composite score. So again, another area where we saw some strong growth. So Chris and I will briefly talk about what do we believe some of those action steps were at the elementary and secondary level, and then I'll walk you through some of those comparable districts. So one of the things that we have talked about is the science of reading training that we did with all staff, and I truly believe that that has had an impact. So every teacher K-5 has had 60 hours of training in how to teach reading effectively. And so having all teachers on that same page and really understanding those strategies, I think has been a huge impact. And I want to thank PPC and the support of the board, because I know it was a state requirement for K-3, but you were supported us in saying we wanted to do it K-5 for all teachers. So I appreciate that support from you. Professional learning communities, you've also heard us talk about at PPC, and you'll see some themes K-12 because we're trying to really create systems of growth and not at elementary or secondary. So you'll hear Chris talk about a few of the same things. We've really focused on professional learning communities. Our teachers have always been collaborative, but this structure really allows them to work closely in looking at their data and assessments and looking at what students and standards they're proficient on and what standards they're still struggling with and how do we make those changes in instruction. Again, K-5, but you'll see this K-12. So our unit assessments in Wonders and Bridges, we're making sure our assessments also align to what those standards they're assessed on in Forward. So we're making sure that alignment is strong. And really continuing with our school improvement plans are what are one or two key strategies rather than a lot of strategies, because we know less is more that we want to focus on in literacy and math to increase student achievement. And then again, also, thank you to the support of the board over the last 3 to 4 years in those curricular adoptions in ELA and math. And now that we've had strong implementations, we're really starting to see the effects of that on our student achievement and growth. So that is very much appreciated. And I just also want to say, as we've taken these action steps, that our teachers are the real ones doing this work and taking this knowledge that they're learning and implementing it in the classroom every day with kids. And so I just want to thank our teachers for their hard work that they've done to help make this impact for our students. So Chris is going to talk briefly about middle and high school, and then we'll move into comparable districts.
Good evening. I won't say things a whole lot different. A lot of the things we're trying to do at the middle school and the high school, like Allison said, are really trying to be a building of systems in the district. But professional learning communities, really most of the work that we're doing falls into that of us just trying to get better at that process of understanding what we want our students to know and be able to do and how we're going to know if they do it, what do we do about it if they don't in particular, and then what if they already know. Our grades 6 through 8, we are trying to align more so to the Forward. We've always done that. We've done a better job of breaking that down. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the things we're trying to do at the end in addition, but really just getting some common assessments aligned to the Forward exam, and that's not something that a few years ago I would say we did as good a job of as we could. So we are continuing that process. Like Allison said, identifying key strategies that we can track and ask questions about when we meet with our principals and their leadership teams in both literacy and math. We have had some new math and ELA adoptions that you're aware of. The most recent one would be math, where we aligned to EdGEMS to do that. And then, as you're aware, we made a bell schedule change at the middle school level that allowed us to have more time in instruction and also allowed a flexible learning time every day for all students. So that's some of the things we've done all the way through. The high school level, the list looks shorter, and part of that is because things get more complex at the high school level with there being more classes, more departments, and that sort of thing. But really at the high school level, it has come down to the professional learning community model and being more intentional about it, of what we've done. The big lift really is the middle one, is aligning to the ACT. It's not something we've done in the past. It's also not anything that our curriculum, you can't buy ACT curriculum. I don't know if everybody else can see that fly, but that fly has been around the whole meeting. And so is aligning to the ACT, we've put a lot of work towards that. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things in the end that we are going to do, and then again, key strategies of what we're going to monitor in our school improvement plans.
We want to take some time right now to share with you a little bit about how did we do in comparison to some of our like districts. And so when we talk about how do we kind of select comparable districts, one of the things we look at is socioeconomic status. So we look at districts that have 45% or more of students economically disadvantaged. Our school district has, in the last few years, ranged between about 53 to 56% of our students economically disadvantaged. Also on the state report card, they look at your percentage of your EL population and special education population, so that is similar. We're also looking at districts that have large high schools, whether they have two or one large high school similar to ours, because that can really impact what a report card looks like as well. Another tool that we're actually exploring and possibly moving into with our district, but we have looked at other districts such as Sheboygan, who has used the Wisconsin Policy Form. And so that is a tool that, so we are considered one of Sheboygan's comparable districts. And Wisconsin Policy Form is a research-based institution that's nonprofit, bipartisan, that really looks at government and education issues across the state. And they are out of Madison and Milwaukee. And they determine, they gather data, and based on that data, what are some key issues in government and education, and what is that data telling us? So how can we think about how to use that data to make systems improvements? So that is something that other districts have used, and we've looked at some of theirs, and we are looking at that for ourselves as well. So how did we do in grades 3 through 8 on forward in comparable districts and in comparison to the state? So slightly below the state in 3 through 8, but second across comparable districts. When we look at third grade, again, we are the highest in those comparable districts and above the state average. In fourth grade as well, we are at the top of all of those districts as well as above the state average. In fifth grade, you'll see the same thing. We are at the top of all of those districts and above the state average. So as we move into sixth grade ELA, you'll see that we start to have a little bit of a drop there in where we fall in relationship to the state average and other comparable districts. And you see that in seventh grade as well. But then you'll see that we start to make a little bit, we start to increase and recover a little bit back in eighth grade. And so that's definitely one of the areas that we want to focus on, and why are we seeing that drop, and why maybe are some other districts not seeing a significant drop as we are. So we will talk about that a little bit as well too. One other thing that's reported out on the state report card is different student groups. So also, as we looked at our different student groups and populations, all of our student groups made growth this year. We had than Hispanic, where we had a slight decrease. So that is also reflected in our report card as well. Then when we move to math, so we look at overall in grades 3 through 8, slightly below that state average, but fall second in there among those like districts. When we look at third grade, we are above the state average, and in that first, at the top there as well for third grade math. When you look at fourth grade math, we're still above the state average, but just dropped below Fond du Lac. And in fifth grade, we're back at the top, and we are, again, significantly above the state average in that way as well, in the area of math. And so then as we kind of see that same pattern again like we did in ELA. So we start to see that drop in 6th and 7th grade, but then we start to see that we kind of close that gap again back in 8th grade. So again, what can we identify as far as why we're seeing some of those gaps? And we'll talk about that as well. So again, student groups in math, we saw growth in all of our student groups again, but Hispanic, we did see a slight drop in math. But overall, those student groups that are assessed on forward as well, we saw continued growth with almost all of those groups. So Chris is going to show you a little bit now about where do we fall within the ACT scores among those like districts.
So you can see our ACT composite, and one of the things, this is the only graph we did this to because I want to give you some perspective with it. The state average in the ACT this year is 19.2. We're at 18.5. Had we shown no improvement, that's the red line, we would have been at 17.6. So it just gives you an indication of the amount of work that our staff has done in the last few years to get our students to that improvement. So I just want to explain something. These are the DPI benchmarks on ELA on the ACT. And sometimes you'll look and say, well, wait a second, you presented some ACT data before, and those percentages don't look exactly the same because the DPI benchmark and the ACT benchmark are not identical. And when we first get our data and we report to you the data early on, we have to use the ACT benchmark because it's the benchmark we have, right? Until ACT or until DPI decides if or not they're going to change their benchmark. So part of the reason we use the ACT benchmark is A, it doesn't change very often. Two, it's more rigorous, and we would like to be held to a more rigorous standard, and our goals are set against the ACT standard. So when you see some of those percentages, that's why, and it's usually, and I try to make sure I'm telling you when it's the DPI standard or the ACT standard. But these are all DPI standards. So you can see in comparable districts, we're below the state average, but not by much in ELA. And ACT, if you remember, is 11th graders. So these are current seniors now, this group. In math, you can see we've got some work to do against the state and comparable districts. And then we'll go to pre-ACT. So this is 9th grade, current 10th graders. You can see we're real close to the top there. Still have a ways to go to get to the state average, as do a lot of our comparable districts. And then if you look at the pre-ACT and ELA for our 10th graders, our current juniors, all right, so this is the group that will be taking the ACT. You can see a little bit behind on the ACT and down a little bit further against our comparables. Pre-ACT in math, you can see just off the state average, current 10th graders in that, and then pre-ACT in math for our 10th graders, our current 11th graders, a bit lower in where they hold their place. So,
Why don't you go ahead to the next?
you want me to go and do that? We didn't. Yeah, that's okay. All right. So yeah, just so you don't have to. We're not playing quite so much pickleball, I think, is what Mark was mentioning before the meeting. Some areas of focus. If you're looking at the data, there are some obvious things that stand out. And one, in general, you look at math and you're like, well, what's going on in math? And so this summer, we reached out to CISA 6 and said, we'd like some help in figuring out what's going on in math in our district. So we hired them to complete a math audit, which they are in the process of doing. They visited a large percentage of our math classrooms already this year, have talked to as many math teachers as they could, school psychologists, math coaches, principals, ALCs. We are sharing every bit of data about math that we have for the last 5 years and our performance. They have access to all of our curriculum so that they can give us some feedback of like, okay, here's what we see in math. And it's not because, I told our secondary math teachers, it's not because I think the folks at CISA 6 are way better math teachers than the teachers we have here. But they get to other places and they know what else they're seeing. Of like, hey, you know, when we're here and we see their data, here's something they're doing that you're not, right? And they can give us that feedback where we just can't. We are having transition conversations between the 8th and 9th. Those have been very productive so far. Than we've had in the last 2 years. The teachers really enjoy them. I think they've learned a lot. We need to start putting what they learned into action more so. We've made a change that you're aware of that we used to STAR test and now we iReady test. We believe that exam will align much more closely to forward at the middle school level. That will give us much better data to make some changes, not just in curriculum, but more so in, well, are we instructing things at the right time? Like, if our I-Ready data doesn't look great in September, is that because, well, we haven't covered that yet? Or, well, we should have known that already. Like, we got to do something about that. You're aware of the AVID program at the high school. We will continue with the AVID program. This will be our 4th year there. We'll have some graduates, so I'm going to have some really cool data and stories to be able to share with you about the high school success. We just had a whole lot of people interested in being trained in AVID at the middle school level. They are really excited about planning this year and what they're going to do. We've already implemented some AVID strategies at the middle school level faster than we really anticipated because of people's eagerness to do so. Mastery Prep, if you remember Mastery Prep, at the high school level is our assessment that is sort of like I-Ready at the elementary and middle school. It's aligned to the ACT. We're fortunate we've had a relationship with Mastery Prep for a few years. Mastery Prep is the company that ACT has hired to do their prep. So if you go onto ACT's website and say, I would like to do ACT prep, it will say ACT prep developed by Mastery Prep or something, some language like that. So that's been helpful. The Flex at the middle school level, we're in our 3rd iteration, so to speak, of that. I-Ready is helping us be much more focused because we have data that says, well, here's where our kids are, and we have a tool that will help us when students aren't where we would like them to be to remediate that. And then you've heard us talk about professional learning communities. We're going to continue to do that. One of the things that we are working with right now at the middle school and high school level is a tool that we haven't had in the past to really track our common summative and common formative assessments. We haven't really been able to do that. So we've worked really hard last year on creating common summatives that are aligned to forward in ACT. And now in our Flex, we have a tool that we don't want teachers to spend a whole lot of time breaking down the data and creating graphs and spreadsheets. That's not what I want them to do. I want that data to be easily accessible, and I can look at a chart and I can say, these are the 17 kids that can do this. These are the 4 kids who can do this. These are that sort of thing. And we believe this tool will help us. We're working our way through it and getting better and more adept at it, and that will help us in our professional learning community process. So those are some things that we're focusing on. One of the things that's not up there is you look at that data, and if I were any one of you 4, I would ask me what's going on in 6th grade, and we're working on that. Just had in fact, an email conversation with our 6th grade, our middle school principals of, hey, here's some thoughts about what we're going to do to put the right people in the room to have the right conversations to really break this down. If it was simple, we would have solved it already. And it's not as simple as, hey, this and this. So it will likely require us to talk to some of our peers that are on the graphs and say, you don't seem to take the drop we do. Do you do something different that we don't? So those are some areas of focus, and we'll go back to some elementary.
So just a couple of things with elementary where we saw some of the drops, again, were in 4th grade, a little bit with ELA and math. So as we think about continuing that training for staff on fluency, decoding, and comprehension, we're going to focus on a 3-part series on fluency strategies, more focused on grades 3 through 5. They've had one already, and they'll have another one in November. And so we also have K2 that are a part of that, because 3-5 was a part of the earlier grades as well too, but we also want our K2 teachers to know where or what does fluency look like as they get into 3rd and 4th and 5th, what's that expectation? Also, this is the first year we had our 3rd graders who were on a reading plan and were not proficient on forward that have to be on a reading plan in 4th grade. And that 4th grade plan focuses on reading fluency. So it's important that we continue to train staff on those effective strategies for that. Chris already mentioned the math audit. Chris and I, within that math audit, felt it was important because we see the drop in 6th grade to start looking at 4th and 5th grade classrooms. So where do we see the issue that happens between those 2 years when you see that they're at the top of those comparable districts to falling to the middle? And as he mentioned, we've already had some conversations. We noticed within the data, for example, Sun Prairie has a very small drop, so we're in conversations with them already to kind of go out and meet with them and talk about what do their structures in fifth and sixth look like. Math fact fluency. So one of the areas to focus on is we're hearing great things from our sixth grade teachers as far as kids have coming in with much stronger foundational skills in math in middle school now. We're seeing much better problem-solving skills. They're a higher level with fractions, but they aren't very efficient in their fact fluency. So they can figure out how to solve a problem, but they still might draw out a strategy. So as you know, we were familiar with time tests growing up. I know it might be a little, but too much of that can also be a problem. But we're looking at supplemental resources to get some fact fluency practice for all of our students to help them be more efficient in that. Learning those math facts quickly. They know them, but we need them to be quicker in solving problems. Then again, teacher voice, extremely important. So continuing those conversations between fifth and sixth grade teachers about what do they feel might be some of the challenges in ELA and math for our students as they transition. And then again, the iReady district assessment change that we hopefully will much better align and give us much better data in relationship to how our students are performing on the standards. So those are some key action steps that we're looking at this year. So we have lots of celebrations and we're excited about that growth, but we know we have a lot of areas to grow yet. And so those are some of the key things we're going to be focusing on this year to continue to improve in those other areas. So really, we just want to take a minute if you have any questions.
I just want to comment that I was happy to hear that you were having conversations with Sun Prairie, because I'm like, what's Sun Prairie and Fond du Lac doing in the elementary and middle level, but then what are they not doing in the high school? Because Fond du Lac falls below us, so they're doing something really well, but then they're also seeing a drop off in high school. So when you said you're having conversations with like districts, I always think that you can learn best practices from other districts, and having those conversations and those open doors with other similar sized districts is very helpful. So I was appreciative that you shared that, because just know my motto is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's already invented. You just got to grab other good practices from other districts. So I'm glad you're having those conversations.
Yes, so
Thank you.
definitely excited to talk to those educators in those districts as well.
Yeah, I was, we were both chuckling about Fond du Lac, and it's interesting in looking, and I'm sure you've done this too, you're, looking from year to year, and then you see some shifting, and I imagine that they implemented some changes, and that hasn't gotten, those students in high school didn't have those changes yet, because they were implemented after they were there, after they had left elementary school, or after they had left middle school. So that is kind of reassuring in a way, though, to see there aren't just schools way above us systematically, but there is movement among our peer groups within, some of these cities, are kind of bouncing around a little bit. And clearly there are some areas where they've excelled, and I'm so glad, I appreciate that we're going to use them as resources. And it would be so great to be seeing soon Janesville at the top of everything, and I'm excited for that. And then all these other school districts are going to be like, we got to beat Janesville. Any other comments?
Just from a historical perspective, can you tell me when was the last time, I know we made the reading curriculum changes, when was the math curriculum changed recently as well?
Yes, I would say within the last probably about 4 years, we adopted just right around COVID or right after COVID. So fairly recent. I mean, I think it takes several years to kind of see that impact in the teachers to learn the curriculum. So we've seen gradual progress and just more this year. And then I want to say, was it 2 years ago for middle school math?
Yeah, we went to HMH.
Yeah, middle school math and ELA.
HMH, which is the same curriculum we use at the high school, so there's a continuity 612.
And that's for ELA, and then math is Ed Gems, and that was about 2 years ago as well.
Yeah,
Correct.
I don't know which one was first, but
Yeah.
they were bang bang.
Sorry, I have one more question. The Wisconsin Policy Forum, can you explain to me again how is that going to benefit us? I Googled them while I'm sitting here and I'm a little confused as to what the benefit
Sure.
is there.
So they will help you look at what are your exact comparable districts, so that you can see how you're doing in relationship to those districts. But they not only look at your achievement and growth data, but they'll look at other districts to see how are you alike or different in the amount of spending that you have per pupil. So to know, are other districts spending more per pupil and having higher outcomes, or spending less and still having higher outcomes? It also looks at teacher retention rates and provides that in comparable districts. So do we have more teacher turnover or less, which obviously can impact those students in front of us. So it doesn't just look at achievement, all of those areas that help us make better decisions and really somewhat just ask better questions about where do we need to improve.
Thank you, that would be valuable information, I think, especially from those of us who sit up here and make the decisions about the budget, so that's huge, thank you.
Yes.
All right, well, if there are no further questions, we can move on. Thank you so much for this
Yep.
great presentation, very exciting news, and as always, we look forward to seeing what the further rollout on that state report card will be. We appreciate it. Okay, presentation of benefits updates, Jamie Brown.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I'm just going to provide you with a brief update for benefits and kind of where we have been and where we're headed. We'll kind of talk about the staff trainings that we're offering, the Benefits Advisory Committee, and then the flu vaccination clinic. So last year, the Benefits Department started offering trainings once a month. We had a wide variety of subjects, but we tried to at least get something into the employees' hands every month. So in September this year, we had a WRS training. Last week, we just had HSA training with Johnson Bank. We are looking in November to have 403B, 457, some type of financial wellness training. We're still trying to get that kind of figured out, and we try and take December off. There's lots of sings and celebrations going on in the buildings, so everybody's excited for the holidays. Some of the future trainings that we are looking at is some stress management, SDJ retirement, some motivational speakers, benefit fair, and financial training. The Benefits Advisory Committee will be starting up again. Thank you to Commissioner Richardson for volunteering to be on that committee. We do have our schedule with with the date in April for tentative based upon when the renewal will be finalized. Just as a reminder, our committee does include staff from all employee groups. Includes our teachers, food service, custodial, JEA, board members, and our support staff. The flu vaccination clinic is new this year. It was back, the last time we had it was in 2019. This year we are bringing that back. We are offering this at no charge to all full and part-time staff of the district, regardless of their enrollment in insurance. So one of the initiatives for staff excellence is maybe this can help have all staff here and kind of not be getting sick throughout the winter. We are also going to offer it to the dependents. They must be 13 years of age or older, and they must be enrolled in the health insurance. We do have a Saturday date. Bree and I will be here this Saturday to ensure that we hit all the schedules. I did throw this slide in here just because I would really like to give a shout out to Bree Parker. She did a really good job on bringing back the flu clinics, and she's just been working really hard to work with the buildings and Mercy to get that scheduled. In addition, she has gotten all of our new hires enrolled in benefits, and in addition to her day today. So I just really wanted her to be recognized for that. Just a brief update on our enrollment comparisons. These numbers do include our active and retiree group. You can see that after the open enrollment, we did have that anticipated shift from Dean to Mercy. We did drop over 50%. Mercy did show an increase as well as the enrollment in the FAHP. You will see a bit of a higher number of enrollees this year compared to last year, and that is just because we had a high amount of retirees this year that stayed on the insurance, and then we are also providing benefits for their replacement as well. So just, in general, I have anywhere from 30 retirees a year. This year I was about 54, right around there, so. Any questions?
I had questions. I appreciated seeing the district staff training, and I was just interested, are these in-person trainings? Are they virtual training?
It depends on what it is. So in September, we did have on-site, we actually had a representative from the WRS come down, and they spoke to staff. The HSA one was a webinar. It was just kind of easier for everybody to be where they were at. So we try and, it's either in-person or webinar.
And are you seeing some good participation in like, how are you tracking that? Because, obviously, if you're going through all the effort of putting together these presentations, we want to make sure that our staff are benefiting from them.
Yes, absolutely. So the on-site trainings, especially the WRS ones, we have lots and lots of participation in. So that one is always a very popular one. The webinar ones may not be as well attended at the time, but we do actually record them when we can and send them out and put them on our benefits website so that all staff can view them at their own time.
That's good. Because, I would imagine, I think that's beneficial to have access to those things because, sometimes we might have someone that was a really good presentation and somebody could access that. Maybe they need a refresher on it, or they were hired later in the game, and so that's really nice. Is there ever any incentive for participating in these types of things, or is it just you're putting it out? I'm just curious thoughts I have.
There was, last year we did have one training that did apply to PD hours, but as of right now, these are just kind of on a volunteer or want basis.
Great. Well, thank you for your work on and putting this. It's always good to see the numbers with the enrollees, especially the Family Advantage Health Plan. We're seeing an increase in that as well, which is great because I know that's always something we're thinking about each year and what that number changes to, and then the Dean and Mercy comparison as well. And I had circled the increase in enrollment, so I appreciate that you pointed it out. Are there any other questions about this presentation?
I remember when we talked about that Family Advantage Plan, the cost savings that was associated with it, and I've never not seen a year where it's not increased. I think it went from like 60 to like 80 to like, now it's up to 135.
Yes.
So that's actually really good to see, but is there a cost savings or something? I know there's a financial impact. Can we see those numbers, or is that a Dan McCray question?
Yes, we can actually try and get some of those numbers. I don't know them off the top of my head, but for a future meeting, absolutely.
Why not. You don't
No.
have those right off the top of your head, but that information, that financial information would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say, you always end up waiting to the very end of our meetings, very patiently, instead of right away at the top. I'm sure maybe you'd like to be the first person to present. Maybe we'll have to have like a little drawing of names, who goes first for the PPC
okay.
planning session. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I shout out to all the individuals who are participating in the Benefits Advisory Committee. It's really valuable that we get input from, our employees, because that's helps us make decisions going forward. So thank you to everyone who will be, and Commissioner Richardson, who is sharing her time with that committee as well. Well, everyone, we are at the end of the meeting, and our planning session is this following Monday. So if there's something that you would like us to be adding to the agenda or talking about that, please reach out to me so we can do that. And I have an announcement that I had shared that we would be having a schedule and information going out about touring Marshall, and I dropped the ball, and Julie already knows this, and I have talked with Principal Schmelz on rescheduling, because we had tentatively set a date, and it just, anyway, so if anyone's listening, that is happening, and I will need your help emailing board members, please and thank you, about that once the date is confirmed, and I need to make sure that I have enough turnaround so that that can go out. But I'm just apologizing to anyone who was expecting an email to hear about that, because that was my mistake, by the way. But everyone makes mistakes from time to time. Our next PPC meeting is the first Monday in October, November 3rd at 4:30. So we look forward to seeing all of your smiling faces there and then. If there are no other questions, comments, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.